The timeline of social decomposition is mathematically predictable. Chaos is not random. It follows a strict entropy curve. Within 48 hours of a grid-down scenario or a hyperinflationary collapse, the rule of law evaporates. At this critical juncture, the Hunger Games begin. But it is not the strongest who survive. It is the invisible. Most preppers spend years accumulating stockpiles of food, water, and ammunition, believing these assets ensure their longevity. This is a fundamental miscalculation. Your supplies are not your lifeline. They are your bounty. If you have spent thousands of dollars hardening your home and stocking your pantry, but failed to master the art of obscurity, you have merely gathered resources for the man who kills you. The human predator operates on the same biological algorithm as a wolf or a lion. Predation is an energy equation. The attacker weighs the caloric cost of the breach against the potential caloric reward inside. Your goal is not to be invincible. Your goal is to be a caloric deficit. You must look like a waste of time. However, the modern survival industry has sold you a lie. Retailers push tactical aesthetics, aggressive signage, and overt security measures that do not deter criminals, but rather advertise your net worth. You have been trained to signal your preparedness. You are broadcasting a frequency that screams loot drops, which is the paradox of visible hardening. You believe that barring your windows, installing visible cameras, and posting aggressive warning signs creates a psychological deterrent. The reality is the opposite. To a desperate populace or an organized raiding party, visible security implies valuable assets. A starving mob does not waste energy breaking into a dilapidated house with a broken door, because the visual data suggests the structure has already been picked clean. When you fortify your perimeter with obvious, high-tech modifications, you are differentiating your property from the baseline of the neighborhood. Differentiation is death. Consider the psychology of the trespassers will be shot sign. You place this on your fence to instill fear. But to a hardened criminal element or a former military unit turned rogue, this sign communicates specific, actionable intelligence. It tells the aggressor that there are firearms on the premises. You have just advertised a weapons cache. Guns are high-value trade items in a collapse economy. By trying to look dangerous, you have designated yourself as a high-value target. The raiders now know to approach your home not with a pry bar, but with Molotov cocktails to flush you out, or to engage you from a distance with long-range rifles. Intimidation fails when the enemy has nothing to lose. This leads us to the physics of the greyman theory. True camouflage is not about wearing military fatigues. Wearing camouflage in an urban environment creates a contrast against the background of concrete and civilian clothing. Contrast draws the eye. The human brain is wired to detect pattern disruptions. If you are the only person on the street wearing a plate carrier and holding a radio, you are the anomaly. The anomaly gets neutralized first. The greyman concept is the application of social engineering to physical appearance. You must flatten your data points. You want to be a piece of background radiation that the predator's eyes slide over without registering interest. Let us analyze the second deadly sign, the generator signature. In a power outage, silence and darkness are the norm. The survivalist who runs a loud, non-inverter generator to power his lights is committing tactical suicide. Noise is a location beacon. Sound waves travel significantly further in a post-disaster environment because the ambient noise pollution of traffic and industry has ceased. The acoustic footprint of a standard generator can be heard for miles. But the auditory signal is only half the problem. The visual signal of light leaking from your windows is even worse. You might think your blackout curtains are sufficient, but have you tested them against the physics of light leakage? A single photon leak is a lighthouse in a total blackout. If your house is the only structure on the block emitting a faint glow from the edges of a window frame, whilst the rest of the grid is dark, you are signaling that you have electricity. Electricity implies fuel. Fuel implies resources. Resources imply food. You have created a vector for every desperate family within a 5-mile radius to converge on your location. The mob does not hate you. The mob is simply following the gradient of energy. You are the heat source. To vanish, you must embrace the misery of the environment. If the neighborhood is dark, you must be dark. If the neighborhood is cold, you must appear cold. This brings us to the concept of performance poverty. This is the deliberate engineering of your property's exterior to mimic the decay of the surrounding area. While the amateur prepper is painting his fence and clearing debris, the professional survivalist is scattering trash on his lawn. Disorder mimics emptiness. A well-maintained lawn in a crisis suggests order, discipline, and supplies. A lawn covered in refuse, with a boarded-up window and high weeds, suggests abandonment. The Raiders' risk assessment algorithm scans for the path of least resistance. When a group of looters moves down a street, they are conducting a rapid visual audit. House A looks secure, clean, and has a warning sign. House B looks abandoned, with a door slightly ajar and trash on the porch. The looters will skip House B because the visual narrative suggests it has already been looted. You must construct a narrative of destitution. This is not cowardice, this is biological mimicry. Just as certain insects have evolved to look like dead leaves to avoid predation, you must evolve your home's appearance to look like a dead asset. However, visual deception is useless if you fail to manage your olfactory footprint. This is the third sign, and it is invisible to the eye, but undeniable to the lizard brain. The smell of cooking. In a famine scenario, the human sense of smell becomes hyperacute regarding food sources. The chemistry of cooking meat or boiling grains releases volatile organic compounds that travel effortlessly through the air. The wind is a traitor. If you are cooking bacon or baking bread while your neighbors are eating boiled leather, you are inciting a riot. The scent of roasting protein does not just vanish, it diffuses according to the laws of gas dynamics. In a stagnant urban canyon, food odors can linger for hours, creating a concentration gradient that leads straight to your kitchen vents. Hunger turns your neighbors into bloodhounds. History confirms this. During the siege of Leningrad, the mere scent of bread was enough to trigger murder. To survive, you must practice strict olfactory discipline. This means embracing the misery of the cold soak. You do not cook. You rehydrate freeze-dried meals with room-temperature water. You eat cold canned stew. You consume calories for fuel, not for comfort. If you must boil water to sanitize it, you do so at 3 a.m., the time of deepest circadian sleep for the human population, and you do it in an interior room with no ventilation to the outside. Comfort is a beacon that will get you killed. This brings us to the fourth deadly indicator, trash intelligence. Modern warfare relies heavily on intelligence gathering, and your refuse is the most accurate dossier of your logistical capabilities. You might believe that throwing away a box for a new solar generator or a case of high-grade ammunition is harmless because the garbage truck still comes on Tuesdays. This is a fatal complacency. Your trash is a shopping list for future looters. Criminal elements and observant neighbors often scout targets weeks before a collapse event. When they see packaging for bulk medical supplies or long-term food storage in your bin, they are marking your location on their mental map. You have effectively handed the aggressors an inventory of your loot drops. The principle of data sanitization must be applied to your physical waste. Nothing leaves your perimeter that identifies your preparedness level. High-value packaging must be destroyed, cut into non-recognizable pieces, or hidden inside the dirty, nondescript trash of a standard household. If the grid is down and waste collection services have halted, you face a new biological hazard. Piling trash in your backyard attracts rats and flies, which breed disease. However, burning trash creates a smoke signal and a distinct chemical smell that differs from wood smoke. Smoke is a vertical arrow pointing to your position. The solution is brutal efficiency. You must minimize waste production to near zero. All organic matter goes into a deep compost pit, covered immediately to suppress odor. All plastic and metal must be washed, crushed, and stored silently inside the home until it can be safely disposed of. You cannot afford to alter the exterior environment with fresh dig sites or burn piles. Now we must dismantle the fifth and perhaps most subtle error, the pattern of life. Humans are creatures of rhythm. You wake up at sunrise. You check your perimeter at 8 a.m. You fetch water at noon. You light a candle at dusk. Predictability is the precursor to an ambush. A sniper or a kidnapping team does not strike at random. The attackers observe the target for days, logging the entry and exit times to establish a pattern. If you establish a routine, You allow the enemy to choose the time and place of the engagement. By checking your fence line every morning at the same time, you are telling the observer exactly when you will be exposed and where to aim the rifle. To disappear, you must randomize your existence. You must become a slave to the random number generator. Do not patrol on a schedule. Roll a die to determine if you check the perimeter in 10 minutes or 2 hours. Do not move during the day. The human eye is evolved to detect movement in daylight. In a high-threat environment, you must become nocturnal. Move when the rest of the world is paralyzed by the biological imperative to sleep. But even in darkness, you must move differently. The gray man does not walk with the confident, upright stride of a soldier or a prepared survivalist. That gait suggests health, muscle mass, and energy surplus. You must mimic the physiology of the weak. Observe the posture of the starving and the defeated. They hunch, they shuffle. They conserve kinetic energy because their caloric intake is critically low. If you are forced to move outside during the day to scavenge or gather intelligence, you must adopt this physical persona. Walk with a slight limp. Keep your head down, not out of submission, but to hide the alertness in your eyes. Wear clothes that are slightly too big to suggest recent weight loss. Your physical silhouette must scream zero value. If a predator assesses you and sees a healthy, well-fed individual moving with purpose, the predator assumes you have a food source. If the predator sees a broken, shuffling figure, the predator assumes you are already dying and not worth the caloric expenditure of an attack. However, hiding in plain sight is only effective if you can control the information flow within your own group. This leads to the most dangerous variable in any survival equation, the loose leaf. You may be a master of the gray man theory, but if your child, your spouse, or your untrained partner boasts to a friend about the stockpile in the basement, your security architecture collapses instantly. Silence is not just a rule, it is a structural necessity. Operational security, or OPSEC, fails the moment information leaves the inner circle. In a collapse scenario, information is the most valuable currency. A neighbor who knows you have antibiotics will sell that information to a gang leader in exchange for their own safety. Your secrets are the price of their survival. The betrayal will not come from malice, it will come from desperation. A mother with a feverish child will remember that you mentioned buying fish antibiotics 3 years ago. She will lead the mob to your door, not because she hates you, but because biology overrides morality. Therefore, the only true defense is total information quarantine. No one outside your immediate survival unit can know the extent of your preparations. To the outside world, you must appear just as panicked, just as hungry, and just as unprepared as they are. You must participate in the collective misery. When the neighbors complain about the lack of food, you must complain louder. When they ask if you have spare batteries, you must ask them if they have any to spare. You must mirror the desperation of the herd to hide the wolf within. But what happens when the herd becomes a stampede? When the city itself becomes a death trap, and the gray man strategy is no longer sufficient because the infrastructure is burning down around you. At this stage, the strategy shifts from static concealment to dynamic exfiltration. You must know when to abandon the fortress. The bug out is not a camping trip. It is a tactical withdrawal through hostile territory. Most people wait too long. They fall victim to normalcy bias, the psychological phenomenon where the brain refuses to accept the severity of a disaster until it is too late. Hesitation is the signature of the casualty. To escape the blast radius of societal collapse, you must identify the pre-collapse indicators that the masses ignore. The stock market does not crash overnight without tremors. Civil unrest does not explode without sparks. You must be watching the flow of logistics. Watch the trucking lines. Watch the diesel reserves. When the supply chain begins to fracture, the clock starts ticking. The window of opportunity to exit a collapsing urban center is governed by a strict mathematical limit known as the golden hour. This is not 60 minutes. It is the delta between the initial trigger event and the critical mass of public realization. Once the general population understands the severity of the crisis, the window slams shut. Panic is a contagion with an R0 value higher than any virus. If you are reacting to the news on the television, you are already a casualty. You are reacting to stale data. The professional survivalist acts on leading indicators, moving while the masses are still debating the validity of the threat. This leads us to the catastrophic failure of the primary evacuation route. The highway system is a trap designed by civil engineers for optimal flow, not for mass exodus. In a grid-down scenario, the interstate becomes the world's largest parking lot, and subsequently, a linear hunting ground. A vehicle that cannot move is not a transport asset. It is a steel coffin. When fuel pumps fail due to power loss, thousands of cars will run dry simultaneously, blocking all lanes. You cannot rely on GPS algorithms that depend on cellular tower triangulation. Those systems will be offline or saturated. You must navigate by the topography, not by the traffic signs. This requires physical maps and the knowledge of tertiary roads, utility easements, and rail lines. However, moving involves the risk of interception. This brings us to the sixth deadly sign, the tactical vehicle fallacy. The survival industry markets lifted trucks, matte black paint jobs, and external fuel jerry cans as the ultimate bug-out vehicles. This is marketing, not survival. A militarized vehicle is a magnet for high-caliber ballistics. If you drive a vehicle that looks prepared for war, you are signaling to the National Guard that you are an insurgent, and to the desperate mob that you are a supply truck. The checkpoint guards will stop you. The police will commandeer your vehicle for official use. The rioters will block the road with burning debris to force you to stop. You want a vehicle that is invisible. You want a dented minivan with a "baby on board" sticker and peeling paint. You want a sedan that looks like it is barely running, even if the engine is meticulously maintained. The goal is to look like a refugee, not a combatant. Your supplies must be hidden under floorboards, inside door panels, and within false bottoms. Visual poverty is your passport through the checkpoint. Let us analyze the physics of the checkpoint. When the government declares martial law, the Constitution is effectively suspended. The Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable search and seizure, does not exist in a state of emergency. Executive orders often authorize the confiscation of food, fuel, and weapons to support relief efforts. If you approach a checkpoint with a visible rifle and a truck bed full of MREs, you will be stripped of everything. The state views your hoard as a strategic reserve for its own personnel. To pass through a containment zone, you must employ the concept of the decoy cache. You cannot appear to have nothing, as that is suspicious. You must offer a sacrificial tribute. Keep a small, visible amount of food and water in the front seat. Have a cheap, broken firearm in the glove box. When the soldiers or the gang members search you, they find the decoy. Their dopamine receptors fire because they have found loot. They confiscate the decoy items, and satisfied with their haul, they wave you through. You must pay the toll to save the cargo. If you claim to have nothing, they will tear your vehicle apart until they find the hidden cache. You must manipulate their psychology by giving them a quick win. But what if the escape is impossible? What if the perimeter is sealed before you can mobilize? Then you are forced into the most dangerous phase of survival, the siege. This is where the psychology of isolation breaks the unprepared mind. Humans are social animals. We crave validation and contact. In a long-term grid-down scenario, the silence is deafening. The amateur radio operator makes the fatal mistake of transmitting. This is the seventh deadly sign, the electronic signature. You might have mastered the physical greyman, but if you are broadcasting on unencrypted frequencies, you are painting a target on your house with radio waves. Radio direction finding is a century-old technology. Even a simple handheld ham radio emits a signal that can be triangulated by anyone with a directional antenna and a map. Organized raiding parties and military units monitor the spectrum. If they hear you asking for news or chatting with other survivors, they can pinpoint your transmission source within meters. The rule is simple: listen, do not transmit. Your radio is an intelligence-gathering tool, not a telephone. You monitor the emergency bands. You listen to the chatter of the local gangs to track their movements. You listen to the military frequencies to gauge the proximity of the front line. But you never press the push-to-talk button unless your life depends on it. And even then, you transmit for less than 10 seconds and immediately change your location. Silence is the only encryption that cannot be broken. As the siege drags on, the greatest threat shifts from human violence to biological failure. The collapse of the sanitation grid introduces a threat vector that has killed more humans than all wars combined: dysentery and cholera. You may have food, you may have ammo, But if you do not have a rigorous protocol for human waste management, you will die in your own filth. The flush toilet is a relic of the powered world. Without water pressure, the sewage lines back up. If you continue to use the toilet, you are creating a biohazard inside your fortress. You must disconnect your home from the municipal grid physically. You must seal the pipes. The survivalist uses a bucket system with heavy contractor bags and quicklime or sawdust to desiccate the waste. This is not glamorous, it is engineering. Pathogens do not care about your tactical gear. A single microscopic organism in your water supply can incapacitate you within hours, causing rapid dehydration and death. Hygiene is not a luxury, it is a tactical defense system. Finally, we must address the ultimate undoing of the lone wolf, the failure of sleep discipline. You cannot stay awake forever. The human brain begins to hallucinate after 72 hours of sleep deprivation. Your cognitive function degrades to that of a drunkard. Your reaction time slow. Your judgment fails. Fatigue is the quiet killer. If you are alone, you must sleep. And when you sleep, you are vulnerable. This is why the lone wolf dies and the pack survives. You need a rotation. But if you are truly alone, you must rely on low-tech early warning systems. High-tech cameras and motion sensors require power and maintenance. They fail. You need physics-based alarms, tripwires attached to cans filled with rocks, crunching gravel scattered on approach paths. These are analog systems that work without batteries. Gravity never runs out of charge. A noisy perimeter buys you the 3 seconds you need to wake up and access your weapon. Your analog alarms may buy you seconds, but biology buys you days. This brings us to the most critical chemical equation of your existence, the water purity myth. Most novice survivalists purchase portable hiking filters and believe they are immune to waterborne pathogens. This is a scientific error that leads to a slow, agonizing death. Filtration is not purification. Mechanical filters operate on pore size, typically around 0.1 or 0.2 microns. This mesh is sufficient to trap protozoa like Giardia and most bacteria like E. coli. However, the average virus is significantly smaller, often ranging from 0.02 to 0.1 microns. The virus passes through your expensive filter like a mosquito through a chain-link fence. In a grid-down scenario where sewage systems have failed, the water table becomes contaminated with hepatitis A, rotavirus, and norovirus. Relying solely on a mechanical barrier is a gamble with your intestinal lining. You must employ chemical warfare against the microbial world. You need calcium hypochlorite or boiling. Boiling requires fuel, which is a finite resource. Chemical treatment requires knowledge of stoichiometry. Too little chemical, the virus survives. Too much, and you poison your own kidneys. You must master the chemistry of bleach production from pool shock, as liquid bleach degrades and loses potency within 6 months. Your knowledge of chemistry is more valuable than your rifle. Once the water is secured, you will face the economic reset. This exposes the 8th deadly sign, the gold standard fallacy. Preppers have been sold the idea that gold and silver coins will preserve their wealth during a collapse. This is an economic delusion based on the assumption that a market still exists. Gold is a heavy, useless rock. In the immediate aftermath of a collapse, the economy reverts to a utility-based value system. A starving man cannot eat a silver eagle. He cannot shoot a gold bar to defend his family. During the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s, gold jewelry was traded for a few cans of beef. The exchange rate collapsed because the utility of the metal was zero. The new currency will be functional consumables, high-proof alcohol, antibiotics, .22 caliber ammunition, and lighters. These items have intrinsic value because they perform work. Value is derived from calorie preservation. Alcohol disinfects wounds and numbs pain. Lighters provide immediate fire without caloric expenditure. If you are hoarding precious metals, you are preparing for the reconstruction phase, which may be decades away. For the survival phase, you are holding dead weight. This utilitarian reality extends to the 9th deadly sign, the arsenal fetish. Many survivalists accumulate dozens of firearms in various calibers, believing that more guns equal more safety. And this is the Rambo complex, and it is a logistical nightmare. You only have 2 hands. In a firefight, you can only operate one weapon system. The spare weapons in your safe are not assets. They are liability supplies for the enemy who inevitably raids your home when you are dead. Furthermore, a diverse arsenal requires diverse ammunition. You cannot scavenge effectively if you need 10 different types of cartridges. The professional operator standardizes. One caliber for rifles, one caliber for sidearms. Standardization is the key to logistics. You need parts commonality. If your primary extractor breaks, you must be able to cannibalize parts from a secondary unit. The man with one rifle and 10,000 rounds of ammunition who knows how to clear a jam in the dark is infinitely more dangerous than the collector with 20 rifles and 500 rounds per caliber. Proficiency outweighs inventory. But even the best equipped operator will eventually face the microscopic enemy. This leads to the 10th and most overlooked sign, the minor injury neglect. In the modern world, a deep cut on your hand is an inconvenience. You wash it, apply ointment, and forget it. In a post-collapse environment, that same cut is a potential fatality. Without the sterile environment of a hospital and the systemic support of antibiotics, infection is the apex predator. Staphylococcus and streptococcus bacteria live on your skin right now. They are waiting for a breach in the armor. Once they enter the bloodstream, sepsis can set in within days. The fever will consume your caloric reserves. The swelling will incapacitate your trigger finger. You must treat every scratch as a life-threatening wound. You must practice aggressive wound debridement. This means scrubbing raw flesh to remove debris, a process that is excruciatingly painful but necessary. Pain is the price of survival. If you do not have a stockpile of broad-spectrum fish antibiotics, which are chemically identical to human versions, and the medical textbooks to dose them correctly, you are walking dead. Finally, we arrive at the psychological event horizon. After weeks of isolation, sensory deprivation, and hypervigilance, the human mind begins to fracture. The lone wolf fantasy collapses under the weight of anthropology. Humans are obligate social animals. We evolved to survive in tribes, not as individuals. Solitude is an extinction event. You cannot maintain 360-degree security alone. You must sleep. You must gather wood. You must treat wounds. If you try to do this alone, you will eventually make a mistake. You will trip. You will sleep through an alarm. You will eat a poisonous berry. The ultimate survival strategy is not isolation, but the formation of a trust architecture. You need a team. But here lies the trap. You cannot recruit strangers during the crisis. Trust cannot be forged in the fire. It must be forged before the spark. You must identify your team now. You need people with complementary skill sets. A medic, a mechanic, a gardener, a tactical shooter. If you wait until the sky turns black to look for allies, you will only find parasites. The parasites will look like victims. They will beg for help. But the moment your back is turned, they will execute the caloric calculation and decide that your life is worth less than your supplies. Charity in a collapse is a risk vector. This sounds heartless. It is. Nature is heartless. The universe does not care if you are a good person. It only cares if your energy output is sustainable and your defense is impenetrable. The survivalist who creates a fortress of solitude creates his own tomb. The survivalist who builds a tribe builds a future. But who do you choose? How do you vet a potential ally without revealing your own hand? This requires the skills of human intelligence and psychological profiling. You must test them before the collapse. You lend them money and see if they pay it back. You take them camping and observe how they handle stress, hunger, and rain. You are interviewing candidates for the job of watching your back. We have dissected the anatomy of your demise. We have analyzed the physics of sound, the chemistry of scent, and the biology of predation. Now, you must integrate these variables into the doctrine of the zero state. The modern world is a statistical anomaly. Civilization is a temporary suspension of the laws of entropy. When that suspension fails, the system snaps back to its default setting: brutality. The greatest threat to your existence is not the nuclear warhead, it is the starving mob. It is the government entity that views your survival as a threat. To survive the correction, you must stop trying to be the hero. Heroes die in the first act. You must become the background radiation. You must become the silence between the notes. The greyman, is the total erasure of the ego. The ego wants to show off the solar panels. The ego wants to be recognized. The ego is a beacon of death. You must kill your ego before the ego kills you. Derive satisfaction from the quiet hum of continued existence. In an era where everyone screams for attention, anonymity is a superpower. The system cannot crush what the system cannot locate. Audit your house tonight. Look at the structure through the thermal optics of a predator. Listen to the hum of the AC unit. You are leaking data. Every second, you are broadcasting coordinates to a world that is getting hungrier. You have the blueprint to dismantle the signals. The storm approaches. The economic indicators flash red. Most people will freeze. They will wait for a savior who is not coming. Reaction is slower than action. You must begin the disappearance today. Remove the seekers from your car. Board up windows from the inside. Standardize your caliber. When the grid goes down and the city descends into chaos, the masses will burn. But you will fade. You will not be the fortress on the hill. You will be the empty lot. You will be the ghost in the machine. The mob will run past your house, searching for a prize. The mob will not see you. You are already gone.